training. Some of you might have been on board on that. Case studies. Some of you might have joined that as well, because it's important that we work with the international expert group of the ELD network, but also always with national institutions and after consultation of national stakeholders. Where are opportunities where the information we are creating can provide an impact? What are the ongoing discussions, and so on? This is where we then roll out in the third step there the information and reach out to decision makers there. In the case of Regreening Africa project, mostly and with a strong focus on political decision makers. So some of our outputs briefly here, there's a synthesis report, there are case studies, there's a specific study on FMNR and more materials there. As Mika had indicated there, some of our study leaders will present the results after I've finished my introduction there. Some key arguments there include that it really pays off to invest in sustainable land management. I'm just putting up examples from Senegal and Mali here. It helps. Sustainable land management, of course, helps with building resilience, and all these arguments there, which ECRAF has underlined with their work. We wanted to show as well that it really pays off economically. And a number of our studies had a specific FMNR focus, Niger, Senegal, and Ghana. And FMNR, championed by ECRAF, developed by ECRAF, and hopefully in the future, much more, creating much more awareness for the FMNR approach in the future there through ECRAF. It exhibits a higher profitability than the best business as usual system. So it means what I said just bluntly, it pays off to do this, right? Do it, and ECRAF will help you doing it, and you will profit from it. So recommendations, there's a selection of our recommendations which we worked out. It includes aspects like investing in existing low-cost practices for long-term benefits. It also includes, of course, strengthening local governance and aspects like this. Access to financing, important for us. But the lower points there, the points at the lower end of the slide as well. Tenure, interministerial coordination, review of subsidies for agricultural development. These are points which can be raised in a policy dialogue on the basis of the results created so far in the Regreening Africa project. And just to pick one out here, the interministerial coordination. Usually we deal with, let's say, the green ministries, right? Environment, or maybe agriculture or forestry or so. To help our partners in these government agencies to reach out to the ministries for planning, finance, development or so, institutions where decisions on larger scale investments are taken, economic arguments can help. Economics can be the language for our partners to reach out to their counterparts in related institutions and underline their arguments, provide additional support or additional arguments for their work and their approaches. So what we think and what we'd like to recommend is building on the fruitful cooperation between ELD and ECRAF earlier. ELD had to leave the project earlier than ECRAF because of internal reasons. Our project only ran for 3 years. But ECRAF is still running full steam, bringing out the results there. And we would like to, or ELD would like to suggest to utilize the results which we created in the policy dialogues to create some impacts there. I see that there is, on a personal note, that there seems to be a favorable political environment at the moment. It is underlined on an international level through the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and then this decade or activities around that decade being implemented on national, subnational level. I've about 25 years or so of experience of being a forester, and I've never seen so much interest in restoration activities and so much willingness to invest in restoration as we see it now. So let's take this chance, this super positive attitude we are seeing at the moment, and utilize it. And I'm repeating this here because economic arguments can be strong drivers for sustainable land use. So ELD initiative has left the Regreening Africa project, but there are still ongoing ELD activities, additional studies here. There is, we've given a list here, quickly have a look at it. So there's additional studies ongoing, which we are still doing. We are working together in creating additional scenario models there. We're bringing in Kenya together the context of land and climate change through soil organic carbon. We are discussing harmful subsidies with partners on national, an international level. As I said, the UN Decade is on. The UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration has started. ELD is a partner there. And furthermore, we are also continuing our capacity development program. So there's different opportunities to come on board. If you're interested in getting involved in economic valuation of ecosystems, land-based ecosystems, get in touch. Take a look at the website. The ELD campus is bringing some new materials there, so have a look. And if you feel that you have any further questions or so, get in touch with us. And certainly stay in touch with the team from the Regreening Africa project, because Mika mentioned it, it's super ambitious, 1 million hectares, but still it is probably, hopefully, first of all, a door opener for even larger scale restoration activities. Hopefully starting in this upcoming decade. So thanks again for the very nice cooperation of ours, and handing over to Mika and the colleagues to look into the details of the studies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for taking us through a little bit about ELD and an overview. We'll also be sharing some links. The ELD team will be sharing some links in the chat if you want to see any of the materials that are referred to. And we've really enjoyed working with you, Mark, and look forward to working with you in your new role in the future. So now I think we should move quite quickly through to the next step. So we have a short film from Somaliland as well as a case study. And Mohammed Hussain from Agribusiness Solutions Hub, I wondered if you wanted to say anything before we start the film, or we can start the film and then you can come in afterwards. Mohammed.
Thanks, Mika. I'm going to give a brief overview of the case studies. As Mark has highlighted, the case study that has been done in Somaliland had two objectives. One is to train local researchers and policymakers on economic valuation methods, ELD method. And the second was to collect data and support them through actual practical activities. So what I'm going to present today is really the output of that effort. If I try to share my screen, bear with me, please.
No problem. Please let us know if you have any problems.
Can everybody see my screen?
Perfectly. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. So basically, alongside the training that we've done for the local officials and researchers, we've undertaken a field work that involved in assessing the extent of land degradation and its impact on livelihoods, local livelihoods, in particular 2 sites in Somaliland. there were another separate case study in Puntland region of Somalia, but that's not something that we're going to discuss today. The report is out there. And as I said earlier, it was the assessment that we've taken was based on ELD 6+1 method. We will have a detail on that approach on the film that I will present. We will share as soon as I finish. We considered two alternative options for each of the two sites that we examined, and we had three different scenarios involving various discount rates and time horizons for each. The findings suggested that the land degradation options that we considered really were superior to business as usual scenarios, that is continuation of current rate of land degradation without intervention. And that was something that was really coming across quite strongly, invariably across those options that we considered. We drawn from the analysis as much touch upon recommendations for policymaker, and in particular in the case of Somaliland, improved land tenure to enhance the existing traditional customary land governance systems, rule-based, community kind of rules that in the absence of a kind of a supportive legal framework struggle to protect the rangelands, especially communal rangelands. The output was a study report for this particular case, policy brief, and we plan dissemination is with UNDP hopefully in the next few weeks. So without further ado, I will share the film, video, which provides a much detailed, kind of overview of what I've just run through quickly in a minute or so. Mark, or
we will share from this. We will share from this side. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Frida, please go ahead. Frida, you'll need to unmute, please, yourself.
Communities and their development. As part of the Regreening Africa project, the Economics of Land Degradation Initiative conducted a case study in Somaliland to assess the effects of land degradation on the livelihoods of pastoral and agro-pastoral communities in Boch and Baligubadle areas as study sites.
In fact, this site where I am now is one of the sites that were selected. It's called Boch. It's a prime grazing land which supports the livelihoods of a large number of semi-nomadic households living in the area. The site has been affected by land degradation over a long period, going back to 1950s, when the first signs of degradation was seen.
Boch Valley is one of the places where we can observe the impact of land degradation, but also effects of possible mitigation options to address the underlying drivers of this environmental change. The Boch Valley in the Garan-Leba highlands is characterized by grass and sparse shrub vegetation and gently sloping land. Historically, most of the Boch Valley was part of a buffer zone for a large protected national grazing reserve. It was only allowed to enter the area in severe drought years, where there was little or no alternative pasture available elsewhere in the region. Unfortunately, this land management practice stopped in 1990. Since then, the Boch Valley has been used as an open all-season grazing area by local and surrounding communities. The unregulated use of the land has led to the gradual desertification and erosion of the valley. Climate change has contributed to the land degradation, with the weather changing during the last decades, as experienced by the lead ranger, Ibrahim Mohamed Bokhore.
There has been a significant change in weather pattern in the region in the past 4 decades. The precipitations increasingly vary a lot in frequency and intensity from year to year. We may have an intense and prolonged rain season in a particular year and none in the next year or 2 years, resulting in severe droughts. The overall trend is towards a much drier and hotter climate. The natural recovery capacity of the land and therefore the ecological balance between different species is increasingly disrupted, leading to a loss of species.
On the one hand, more frequent and severe droughts have disrupted the natural cycles of vegetation recovery, leading to a significant decline of indigenous plant species. On the other hand, unsustainable land use practices such as illegal land enclosures have placed great pressure on the remaining shrinking communal agropastoral lands, which has resulted in severe overgrazing and soil erosion. The loss of land cover has been further accelerated by deforestation driven by the commercial production of charcoal, which stems from the growing demand for cooking energy from urban populations. The changes are clearly visible. The tree roots that were once 1 meter or more below the land surface are now exposed due to rapid soil erosion. All in all, the combination of intensification of land use, climate change, and weak environmental governance all undermine the sustainability of the traditional pastoral livelihoods in the region. The Somaliland government, however, is now aware of the problem. The climate and social change we observed in recent decades will no doubt lead to profound changes in the way we live, as livestock is the backbone of economy and livelihoods. Life in cities is supported by the traditional pastoralism, which is in turn contingent upon the quality of rangelands. Without healthy and productive rangeland, our economy and livelihoods are no longer sustainable. The second study site of the ELD initiative's work in Somaliland is Baligo Badle, which is an agropastoral zone with a higher population density. Currently, there is no land tenure law governing land use. Existing customary rules are too weak to safeguard communal pasture land in the region. People fenced off much of rangeland for private use, preventing access for communal livestock grazing and other uses. As a result, this region has seen the widespread use of illegal enclosures as well. Again, frequent droughts linked to climate change and social changes in the past 3 decades have forced a major shift in rural households from traditional pastoralism toward a more urban lifestyle. This has led to the expansion of existing village centers and the emergence of new ones over the past 30 years. Consequently, the remaining common pasture land is also severely degraded due to overgrazing and urban sprawl.
40 years ago, rangeland in the region were communal grazing land that supported livelihoods of local pastoral communities and wildlife. The introduction of private land enclosures in the context of a changing climate has dramatically altered that equilibrium. Not only have enclosures forced livestock onto the little remaining communal grazing areas, a source of constant social conflict, but you no longer see the wildlife that used to roam around these parts.
Land degradation also creates cultural disruptions.
Whilst pastoralism still remains an integral part of way of life, this may not be the case in future. The next generations may not experience the nomadic pastoralism that underpinned the livelihoods of their forefathers. Will they migrate to the cities or venture abroad in search of a better life? The socio-cultural and economic implications of such rapid changes are enormous. Serious social and political debates are necessary to discuss how we can avert these worrying trends and address the effects of underlying climate and land use changes.
Political conversations have already taken place and are now leading to concrete action. The Somaliland Ministry of Environment and Rural Development has carried out some restoration measures in 4 main rangelands. These measures have had a noticeable impact, leading to a significant improvement in quality pasture and reduced soil erosion, but more is needed to significantly avert the trend of land degradation. There is an urgent need to strengthen research and environmental policy making in the region to address these environmental challenges more sustainably. The ELD initiative has recognized this need and recently conducted a training for a group of local researchers and public officials. The training enabled the group to use ELD's 6+1 valuation approach to show that sustainable land management pays off and is the necessary basis for economic development in the region.
The case study that has been done here with the purpose of building analytical capacity of local researchers and public policy analysis have highlighted actually when there is an effective land management option, you can address the land degradation and reduce the speed with which land degradation progresses.
Scaling these land management options in the region is also the objective of the ICRAF-led Regreening Africa project, which aims to reverse land degradation on 1 million hectares across several countries in sub-Saharan Africa. ELD's approach of economic valuation can support better policymaking and community action. By empowering the community to find a solution and take action, the ELD method increases the chances of success to achieve sustainable land management in Somaliland.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing the video. It's really nice to see the film as well as to hear from you, Mohammed. So what we will do is we'll move on to the next case study, but I'd really like to welcome people to put questions into the Q&A and to the chat. We can answer some of them as we go, and then we'll come back and have some Q&A and some opportunity to ask questions after the next 1 or 2 case studies. So at this point, I would like to welcome Richard Thomas, who's the ELD Scientific Coordinator and also the leader of the Kenya study. So Richard, over to you.
Okay, good day everyone from North America. I'm sharing my screen. I hope you can see it now. Is it visible?
Not quite yet to me, but.
No. Hello?
Hello, Richard. I'm still waiting to see something. I haven't seen it come up yet.
Oh, then maybe I have to ask Jonathan to put it on. It's on my screen, but it doesn't seem to be transmitting.
Jonathan, are you able to do that, or would you need some support?
Yes, sorry, since I had to log in with my private computer, it would take me a while, but I'm on it. If you have it ready, please go ahead and share. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. I'll just see if one of our team is able to share. Frida's bringing it up. Thank you so much, Frida.
Okay.
Please just put into presentation mode, Frida.
Okay, can you see that now?
Yes, thank you. Please go ahead, Richard.
Okay, sorry for the glitch. It's standards in North America are not that good sometimes. The Kenya case studies, there were basically 2 studies done there. One was on communal rangeland management. You can see the areas here in near Isiolo. And the other one was on the Aberdare Water Tower, looking at the ecosystem services. The next slide, please. Okay, in addition to the objectives that Mark outlined in the beginning, we're also aiming to make a contribution to the country's LDN targets. And for Kenya, this is, for example, increasing forest areas by over 5 million hectares and increasing land productivity in degraded areas by about 16%. So the two studies then were looking at the economic valuation of two forms of collective rangeland management practices in Isiolo and Kina counties, and the second one on the Aberdare Water Tower catchment. The second one included the agroforestry, the crop rotations, and things like vegetative grass strips. There was some also other technical options tried in the rangeland example as well. Next slide, please. Okay, the problem, as you just saw, is very similar to the Somalia problem video, that extensive rangeland degradation in this semi-arid, arid area, and in the Aberdare Water Tower catchment, deforestation resulting in land and water degradation. These were the main problems that were addressed. Next. Now I'll go straight into the summary of the financial indicators. And you can see here in the water tower example, there are a range of agroforestry options in combination with other things like crop rotation, vegetative strips, terraces, cover crop. There was simply vegetative strips, crop rotation, with organic fertilizer and crop rotation. And you can see that in this case, there were estimates over 20 years. And you can see that in all of them, there's a positive net present value, which means that the option is economically viable or financially viable for the individual farmers, depending on which one they choose to use. There was a very wide range of options that we had to narrow down and in certain circumstances group, because individual farmers were doing very different things. So that was a challenge in terms of getting to some sort of economic evaluation, but that was done very successfully with help from the university in Nairobi. And you can see that the indicator of the cost-benefit analysis there was positive, greater than 1, which again means that it's worth investing in these. The ratio that came out the best was the vegetative strips and the crop rotation and organic fertilizer. That's because the relatively lower costs of setting up things like agroforestry with those other options. So they all turned out to be very positive and worthwhile in terms of viable options for people in this quite delicate environment. Then when we looked at the communal rangeland management, this was, we did 2 studies. One was on the Community Wildlife Conservancy. There are many of these, as my Kenyan colleagues will know, in Kenya. And the other was more of a traditional DEDA system with religious regions, etc. Traditional means of managing the rangelands and organizing rotations and things like that. These were much larger areas, but again, the net present value, these are in euro figures were quite positive. And in this case, the rangeland is over 30 years, not 20 years as it's shown there. So they came out with positive cost-benefit ratios. But the important thing to add to this is that not only are the economics, or the financial figures positive, it's also the effect on the social organization, which is very important. And the fact that when the land users see the benefits of interventions, the psychology changes quite a bit. And of course, we can't necessarily put a monetary value on that, but the team in the rangeland study, for example, did in fact look at the economics of conflicts and the reduction in conflicts because of the management system. So that's quite important. That team in the rangeland did a really good job of looking beyond and trying to get as close as we aspire to get the total economic value, even though some of those are very difficult. So that's important. Whenever we report on the results of the ELD work, we're also aware that there's a need to put in a narrative that explains the non-monetary outputs that we see with these. The next slide, please. Very briefly, so both the rangelands resulted in better communal rangeland. Both were economically available. Some of the options that were tried there were listed here: rotational grazing, reseeding, rehabilitation of gullies. There was some afforestation work undertaken there, removal of invasive species, and micro catchment water harvesting. All that, there's a lot in the reports. I encourage you to look at the reports for the great detail that's in there. The next, please. And in the water tower, it was the agroforestry plus crop rotation, which gave the best net present value, followed by those vegetative strips. And then, as I said earlier, all the other options give positive cost-benefit ratios, which is quite encouraging. Next, which is, I think, my final slide. Yes, in terms of the impact of this work, this is really important, and this is why we went into the route of establishing ambassadors in the countries, and we envision that those ambassadors will form a stronger bridge between the sort of science and the policy community. So that's an important aspect that we need to touch on as well. So in terms of the impacts, you can see here that there's increased awareness. There's a roundtable, a Nairobi water table between the Department of Finance and Forestry. Again, trying to get the ministerial silos working together is a key part of moving towards policy recommendations and implementation of new policies. The forestry management strategy in Nyandarua was revisited in the context of the main river that's there, Samalawi River. This is one of the rivers there. And encouragingly, the investment in SLM measures have been doubled by the county administration there. There are always some barriers that we have to overcome. There are organizational diversities, but it's important to have these sort of roundtables and bring people together. And then there has been a discussion on payments for environmental schemes. So I'd like to thank the main leaders of the work there, Moses Gichua, Oliver Wasonga, and our ambassador, Alfea Luta, who've all done great jobs in getting this into the policy arena, but at the same time ensuring that the studies have been scientifically robust. I leave it at there, Mike.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks for the attention.
Thank you so much. And I'm just checking on the questions. So just reminding everyone that there's the Q&A, which is a nice option because people can vote your questions up. So far, I do not see any questions for Kenya, but I'm sure that they will come. I'm hoping that Mark and other colleagues can respond. Athanas has put a number of questions about Rwanda. There's also a question about Mali. But I just wanted to take a moment to ask Mohammed if he's able to ask the question in the Q&A related to Somaliland. So there is a question there around someone that's now working in Somaliland and was asking about the slope of the land while terracing is applied together with agroforestry. So Mohammed, are you able to address that question that is in the Q&A around the slope of the land where terracing is applied together with agroforestry?
That site was the mountainous area with hills of about 3 to 5 different, depending on the area where the land degradation has affected. And the terracing was applied only in the areas where there is a the most kind of extensive soil erosion. So it was the area where there were gully formations in the film, while the uphill had some regrassing, reintroduction of lost grassy species, and that has been sufficient actually to slow down the water runoff. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Thank you so much. And there may be some more questions coming out of the Q&A and the chat. I can see some other questions coming, and we'll come back to them after we've heard from Mesfin Tilahun, who led the Ethiopia study. And thank you again to Richard. I'd like to now pass over to Mesfin. Please let us know if you're able to share your screen or whether you would like us to share for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just...
Perfect.
Okay. My presentation is on the case study in Ethiopia. The topic is the economics of land degradation neutrality in Ethiopia, empirical analysis and policy implications to the SDGs. Next. So the main objective of the study is to assess the cost of agricultural land degradation and the economic viability of alternative land management options in Ethiopia, and also assess the land degradation patterns over the period 2003 to 2015-16 fiscal years through developing an econometric modeling approach where we modeled the econometric model of land degradation and the crop production loss model as well, and also assess the future costs and benefits of adopting sustainable land management practices, and also undertake cost-benefit analysis in which we have compared the present values of the sustainable land management scenario versus that of the business as usual scenario. And finally, we drive policy implications, particularly to SDG 15.3 and other related targets. So the scope of the study is generally, it covers close to 30 million hectares of cultivated agricultural lands, degradation in Ethiopia, which is mainly owned and operated by smallholder farmers. And this is because of the fact that agriculture is the dominant sector in the economy, and also the dominant just sector in terms of land cover. In terms of geographical coverage, the study covers all the 9 regional states and 1 city administration. And then the unit of analysis is made at zonal level using crop production data from Central Statistical Authority for the period 2003 to 2015-16. And also we use projections for scenario development for the period 2020 to 2030, which is in line with the SDG timeframe, and also beyond up to 2040. So the map that you see is that all the administrative zones that are covered in this study. So the key results of this study are actually we used the nutrient balance approach for modeling and calculating the nutrient depletion and nutrient loss and from the 30 million hectares which are cultivated with close to 52 crop types, I think. And so what we found is that over the period 2003 to 2003, then annually the country's soil nutrient depletion from these agricultural lands amounts 768,000 tons, which is to mean 60 kilogram per hectare per year. And in terms of NPK loss, through erosion, gaseous exchange, and leaching, which are indirectly estimated using the nutrient balance accounting, we estimated around 781,000 tons per year from all of these agricultural lands, which is to mean 61 kilogram per hectare per year. So the soil nutrient depletion and loss altogether from this agricultural land resulted in an agricultural crop production loss of 104 million tons with a market value of close to 48 billion US dollar at the 2016 average or aggregated weighted crop prices for this year. So to reverse this trend, Ethiopia needs to invest US dollar 97 billion, which means US dollars 7,434 per hectare
Mike?
Okay, I was just wondering if that was on my side or on his side. Let's just give him a moment to come back. It looks like he's dropped out completely. So unless he joins back in the next minute, what I might do is just ask a question to Richard based on the Kenya study. And if Mesfin has a chance, he'll rejoin and can continue. So just a question to you, Richard. It's coming through on the Q&A. There was a question regarding the Aberdares case study, and it might be you, or we can allow one of the participants to speak from the ambassadors. But there's a question in the Q&A that asks about the Aberdares as an important example of implementing payment for ecosystem services. But they also highlighted that apart from Nairobi City Water Company, no other business case has come up to support conservation of upstream farmlands, given the small areas covered by the forest and wildlife areas. How can the project influence the evolution of more business cases to support the initiative? So Richard, I don't know if you want to have a go first, or if we hand over to any of the other colleagues, please just let us know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have either Althea or Oliver on the line. I don't see their names in the list there, but oh yes, Althea, Luta is there. Luta, do you want to come in and speak to this? Is he there?
I've allowed Luta to speak. I'm not sure if he's been able to hear us. I know he's also in the field. Luta, please go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, what was the question again?
The question's in the Q&A, but it's basically saying that the Aberdares ecosystem, land management, provides a good example for payment for ecosystem services. But so far, the only business case really for this has been the Nairobi City Water Company. So how can the project influence the evolution of more business cases to support these land restoration initiatives? That is the question.
Yes, so, one thing about the payment for ecosystem services, it's something that has not really been taken up so much in Kenya. And maybe I think it's because of lack of policies that will guide that or implementation of the same. So yes, it's something that can be done, but it's something that is not currently being done in Aberdare. So I don't know whether Moses is on call, because he was leading the Aberdare project. If he can respond on it properly, then I would.
Yeah, I don't see him on the line here. Quick screen. So yes, I mean, what we did from the very beginning on this was to have a roundtable meeting at the ministry, where they expressed a lot of interest, but they also raised the issues of the sort of blockage within the system in terms of getting people together. I mean, Kenya has very good plans, a statutory framework for sustainable land management options, which is one of the better ones around. The issue is the stumbling block of how to get these implemented and how to bring the ministerials and the investors together to move this forward. Private sector, of course, is an important aspect. They are quite abundant there in Kenya with the glasshouse sort of production. I don't think they've yet moved into the farming situation, but that certainly needs encouragement. I think there's the opportunities are there. I think it just needs more roundtable discussions and platforms that organizations like ICRAF and like the ELD can stimulate.
Thank you so much, Richard. And at this point, I think we can continue asking questions in the Q&A and chat and responding there. We'll come back in a minute and we'll take that idea forward about the roundtables. And also, Paul, on Google, if you have any other recommendations, you can also add them and we'll come back to you a little bit later. I'd like to now, I've noticed that Mesfin has not been able to rejoin. And so therefore, I think we'll go to the next presentation from Ghana. So I'd like to welcome Beatrice Dossa, who's the ELD Regreening Ambassadress for Ghana, to make a short presentation on the Ghana case. And if Mesfin does not join back today, we'll make sure that the presentation is shared. Beatrice, over to you.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfectly. Please go ahead, Beatrice. It just zoomed in.
Okay.
Strange. Okay. I'm not sure what quite happened there. But please start and I'll see if it corrects itself on the next screen. No,
is it working?
It's just zoomed in.
Okay. Maybe I can stop sharing and is it okay?
Just make it start and let's see how it goes. Please go ahead, Beatrice.
Okay. So I'm presenting on behalf of the ELD network in Ghana. In 2019, we conducted a study, that is the case study for farmer-managed natural regeneration in the upper west of Ghana. So farmer-managed natural regeneration, I would shorten it as FMNR. It looks like my screen is not moving. Can you?
Yes, if you want to stop sharing, Frida can share from our side.
Okay.
Frida, is that okay?
So the overall objective of the study was to analyze and strengthen the evidence base for FMNR as cost-effective means to combat land degradation and improve farmers' income. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the picture you see here is the Upper West region of Ghana. This is the map of Ghana on the bottom of the picture. In 2014, an NGO called Center for Indigenous Knowledge, CICOD in short, implemented the FMNR in the Upper West region of Ghana. So FMNR is a cost-effective technique in land restoration where farmers use pruning to regenerate vigorous stems that is naturally occurring on their fields. And so the CICOD NGO implemented this project to help regenerate degraded lands in Upper West region. Upper West region is one of the poorest regions in Ghana. More than 80% of the population there are employed in subsistence agriculture. And the area is vulnerable to climate change. And also there is low productivity of the farming sector. Native tree species are becoming rare. So this is why CICOD went to the Upper West region to help reclaim the degraded land. So our case study was in the Upper West region of Ghana on the FMNR. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the FMNR is really important because it's aligned to Ghana's strategy on the National Determined Contribution objective under the UNFCCC, our national land degradation neutrality targets that aims to combat desertification and reduce wildfires, and also the SDG goals. Please, can you go to the next slide? So with the method, we employ both quantitative and qualitative. We conducted surveys with 600 farmers, asking them, that is those who practice FMNR and those who do not practice FMNR, asking them about the costs of inputs, training, and the profits, their revenues, information about the revenues they made on the farm, on selling their farm products. Can you go to the next slide, please? We also use soil analysis. This is one of our research team member performing the soil analysis on the farms of the participants, and we employ the ELD approach, which is the 6+1 approach in the method. Next slide, please. So the analysis focused on the farm level by comparing the per acre returns from farming under FMNR and non-FMNR farming. Next slide. So 3 scenarios were used. Non-FMNR scenario is where the farmer is intercropping cereals with legumes, and they have low tree density, about 5 trees per acre. And the FMNR scenario, they intercrop with legumes. They have about 13 trees per acre, and then they conduct pruning, thinning, and then reduction of fire. So the third scenario, which is FMNR and SLM scenario, the difference is that the farmer, in addition, practice crop rotation. Next slide. So the result was analyzed using the cost-benefit analysis, discount rating. I wouldn't go into this because it's not my field, but these are some of the analysis that we use in the assessments. Next slide. So the results showed that non-FMNR farmers had constant income because they lack investments into soil and forest improving activity. And for those implementing FMNR, within only 5 years, the farmer can expect 56% increase in productivity of farm crops. Then with those who added crop rotation to FMNR, there is an 86% rise in the crop productivity. And we also have the non-tangible benefits from community bonding through activities like fire management on farms, and then other wider benefits which was not accounted for in this study, like carbon sequestration. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that of the upscaling FMNR include lack of fire management practices which threaten this technique, the limited availability of rural credits, contradictory policy incentives by governments which support intensive inputs and highly mechanized farming, which does not support the FMNR technique because the farmers use small tractors and cutlasses and hoes. And some of these subsidies by the government do not support farmers into FMNR. And then the absence of strong land and tree tenure rights for smallholder farmers. Next slide, please. So these recommendations came up during workshops we had in Ghana whilst presenting the report and also whilst undertaking the study. So reduction and careful management of fires will help farmers regenerate native tree species and contribute to crop productivity. And since more than 80% of the working population are engaged in subsistence farming, this is a reason why FMNR should be considered as a priority for intervention to land degradation, and also reforms of policy and legal frameworks so that the ownership of naturally occurring trees of reserves or trees on farms are vested in communities' consent. Next slide, please. So I would like to acknowledge the research team, Vanya, Angela, Lawrence, and all the institutions that participated in the study. Next slide. If you would like to find out more about the research, it's on this link. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. And we'll be making sure the link is also in the chat so that people can find out more about the study. And the ambassadors in each of the countries will also continue working in this area. So Beatrice, Luta, and others, we look forward to continue working with you through Regreening Africa in the final year. So at this moment in time, I do not see any questions. I do see one question for you, Beatrice, around fire management. If you could just explain a little bit more before we continue on.
Okay, so in the Upper West region, one of the major challenges are fire through charcoal making and also hunting of wildlife animals. But there is a community in Upper West region that has demonstrated for over 10 years fire management. So there hasn't been any case of fire in that region. And so it's very important to promote fire management because it helps in community bonding and also helps the community members to bring out their concern and learn from each other. So this is more what I can say about the fire management.
Thank you so much, Beatrice.
Have I been able to answer the question?
Yes, there's a couple more questions coming in, but I'd ask if you don't mind typing into the Q&A, the responses, just so that we can move on and make sure that we still have a little bit of time at the end for discussion. So thank you so much, Beatrice. So after hearing these exciting presentations from the ELD teams and the studies, I'd like us to move gears a little bit and move over to land degradation assessments and monitoring. And I would like to ask Tor Wagen, who's a senior scientist and lead of our spatial lab at C4ECRAF, to make a presentation. Hi, Tor, welcome.
Thanks, Mika. Yeah, let me share my screen. So yeah, let me know if you're not seeing that within the next few seconds.
No, it's there, perfect.
Great. So basically, I'm just going to take you on a quick tour of some of the tools and approaches that we're using in Regreening Africa to assess and also to track or monitor land health. So not only land degradation, but also land restoration. So how well are we doing? Focusing mostly here on the biophysical aspects of this, but how well are we doing in terms of the effectiveness of the restoration efforts that we're making? So one critical aspect of that is obviously the data collection. So I'll give you a quick overview in terms of what the work we're doing around citizen science, or what we call assisted crowdsourcing, using the Regreening Africa app. And then I'll talk a little bit about how we use more science-based indicator frameworks and the land degradation surveillance framework specifically, and analytics to feed into the project and also for data collection. And then finally, I'll talk about some of the tools that we've been developing or co-developing rather with the country teams, so the stakeholders in the project countries. So the Regreening Africa app is an app that has been developed by ECRAF with partners. There's been a lot of input into this app from all the stakeholders in Regreening Africa. It is available on the Google Play Store. So if you go to Google Play and simply search for Regreening Africa, you'll find it. It can be used by anyone. It's not restricted to Regreening Africa. So if you have another project you would like to use it for, feel free to use it. If you would like us to set you up with an account in terms of data reporting system and so on, and I'll come back to the data reporting system, we can also do that for you. So you can view and download your own data as you go. So basically, it's very simple to set this up and get it running. And I'll just to give you a bit of a highlight. So what we're doing here is what we call assisted crowdsourcing. And the idea is to use this kind of approach for monitoring of land restoration at scale. So as you all probably know, when we use more conventional science-based approaches, which is kind of as ECRAF what we do most of the time, this can be quite costly, but it's very rigorous, and the accuracy we can achieve is very high. So we are complementing that, and I'll come back and talk a bit more about that more structured approach to data collection later. But we're complementing that approach with assisted crowdsourcing in order to scale. So the accuracy might be a bit lower and the noise a bit more, but we are basically able to scale across very large areas and collect a lot of data this way. So how do we use Regreening Africa, and what is it that we collect? So here's some examples, just highlighting, I've focused today on Rwanda. This is being applied in all 8 countries in the project. And also beyond Regreening Africa at the moment, there are other projects that are also using this app. The idea is that we are able to track the types of trees that are being planted, for example, or what types of species we have in FMNR, which has been mentioned several times before, and also various types of management practices. But focusing here on tree planting and the tree species on the left here, we can basically get a good sense using the app of what the species diversity is, or what are the most dominant species that are being planted, how diverse are these systems, and where can we intervene or design interventions to improve restoration options, and so to diversify systems, etc. The app also collects information on where on the farm that people, our farmers are planting trees. So on the right there, you can see an example again from Rwanda. This is not the latest data. It's grown a lot. We have now millions of trees recorded using the app in Rwanda. But you can see here that the majority of plots are in external boundaries, and they're followed by internal boundaries, and there's croplands and woodlots, etc. So essentially, we can then track where farmers are planting, but also the survival rates in these different niches on the farm. So if you look here, that on external boundaries in this particular case, in this example, the survival rate is 72%. So 72% of the seedlings planted have survived at the time that the app is being used to record the latest, and so on and so forth. So this is really important information, because we don't only want to know about tree planting, we really want to know how well these efforts are performing, and that for that, tree survival is a really critical aspect. Another thing that we do with the app, or that users do with the app, is that they delimit the field boundary. So here you can see a map basically showing in blue the line of the boundary that has been walked using the app to delimit that boundary. And then you can see the individual trees within the boundary there. And so we record, users record the number of trees that were planted, the date that they're planted, the species that were planted, the location. So they georeference the key species. And then they conduct measurements of these trees, which is obviously very important if you want to do something like, for example, estimate above ground biomass. And then, as I mentioned, survival rates. So this spatial information is really important, and having these field boundaries and the areas delineated is also a critical thing, because that allows us to then take the data we collect using the Regreening app and combine it with the various outputs from our analysis and the maps that we produce using the LDSF, which I'll come to in a second. Here's an example also, and we'll come back to the Regreening Africa dashboard, but this is just a little snapshot from Rwanda, showing how we can also then look at where tree planting efforts are happening. And in Rwanda, tree planting is by far the most dominant practice, so there's not so much FMNR, which is one of the reasons why there isn't much FMNR being presented here. But FMNR is also part of what comes up on the dashboard. In addition to tree planting and FMNR, there's a module in the Regreening Africa app on nurseries, and there's another module on training. So nursery operators can capture what kinds of species they have available, the number of species, the number of, the germination rates and distribution, etc. And of course, we collect the location of the nursery. So it's possible for people that are planning, for example, are implementing partners on the ground, it's possible to use the data coming out of the app to look at, say, for example, a planned area of intervention for a tree planting campaign, and where is the nearest nursery, and what kinds of inventory in terms of species, etc., does that nursery have, which of course is really quite critical. I mentioned the online data reporting system. So this is what it looks like online, and this is made accessible to the users of the app. So basically, the different teams in Regreening Africa can keep track of efforts as they go, and look at how many households are being covered, how many FMNR plots, tree planting plots, number of trees that are measured, nurseries, etc. You can see from this graph here that, or from this above the map there, that Rwanda has the highest level of activity using the app within Regreening Africa, followed by Senegal, Ghana, Kenya, Niger, etc. So the idea is that with this, with the DRS, or the data reporting system, you can look across the project, so get a broad idea of what's going on across the project, but also drill into individual countries and get summaries of the countries. And what's on the data reporting system is the raw data. So this data is not processed. This is really for the people using the app. And in a second, a bit later, we'll talk about the Regreening Africa dashboard, which is where we are kind of putting the data after it has been processed and checked and everything for everyone to have that available. But before that, I wanted to just go to the land degradation surveillance framework, which is the methodology that we use for to assess land health or land degradation in Regreening Africa. On the left there, you can see the indicators that we have in the LDSF. I'm not going to go into that in detail today, but basically there are indicators around land cover and land use, impact on habitat, land degradation, of course, topography, landform, and then soil health, of course, is also very important. And within those categories, there's a number of very detailed indicators. And for a number of those, we produce maps and we do advanced analytics to produce these types of spatial assessments or maps across the different countries. There's also a field guide that's available online. I'm happy to share the link with any of you if you want afterwards. But the key aspect of the LDSF is that this is a global network of sites, or data-driven network of sites, we like to call it. You can see the markers on the map there. We have sites now in about 45 countries. So with all this data, we have a very rigorous way to then produce maps of, for example, soil organic carbon. So again, coming back to Rwanda, showing here an example of soil organic carbon mapped across Rwanda at 30-meter resolution for 2018. In green there, those green polygons that you see, or the lines that you see, those are the districts that are part of Regreening Africa in the project. So Nyagatare, Gatsibo, Kayonza, and Bukusera. When we have these, once we produce these maps that you see here, we can then go back and combine that with the information that is coming from the Regreening Africa app to allow us to monitor changes over time. And also for carbon monitoring, which is quite relevant, of course, for many of these countries in terms of not just their restoration targets and their commitments in that regard, but also the climate change related aspects of things they're doing. So when we extract this kind of information, that provides us with really critical insights into what the drivers of land degradation are for the different countries, what baseline conditions are. And you can see here in this example, we can see distributions of erosion and soil organic carbon across the countries. So just to give you a couple of highlights, you see countries like Niger, Mali, and Senegal at the top there. We tend to see very low carbon below that red dashed line that you see there. Niger having very low, extremely low carbon. And this is partly due to the fact that these are dryland systems and the types of soils they have. But we also see that in Niger, we have high erosion prevalence. And so low carbon and high erosion prevalence, which means that we have many different things that are what we call sort of compound degradation. And this is really important information in order to target interventions appropriately within landscapes in these countries. If you look at Rwanda and Kenya, in contrast, these are areas with more carbon and wider distribution in terms of carbon, and also quite a wide range in terms of erosion prevalence. But these are types of insights and data that we can extract using data from the Regreening Africa app, but also using other instruments of data collection, like, for example, our monitoring and evaluation surveys. So I'm just going to quickly give you a few highlights of the Regreening Africa dashboard, which will be publicly available in the next month or so. And we're currently in prototype development of this, and this is being co-designed with the different teams, the implementing partners, and other partners within the different countries. For now, we're producing the dashboard for 5 countries. You can see them on top. They're Rwanda, Ghana, Senegal, Kenya, and Ethiopia. But we hope to be able to add Mali and Niger initially, and also then Somalia. So in the Regreening Africa dashboard, we're basically presenting high-level summaries of, for example, tree planting that you can see there at the bottom, FMNR practices by country, Senegal being the highest one there, followed by Niger, Kenya, and Mali. And then also sort of general information around the project, around, for example, components of the project, such as ELD, in this example, the main goals of the project, the land degradation neutrality goals, etc. So all of this information is on the dashboard along with links and summaries of from the baseline survey reports, etc. So there's a lot of information here. When you go into the individual countries, one can actually then explore interactively the things that I talked about before from the Regreening Africa app, but also go in and look in much more detail at the land health indicators that we are measuring and mapping. So here are just some examples, again, from Rwanda, showing maps on the right there. You can see very detailed maps of vegetation cover at the top and soil organic carbon below that. The lines you see there are actually field boundaries. And so these are quite detailed. They're at 30-meter resolution. So we can actually capture variations in these indicators within individual farmers' fields. And then we can aggregate that information up and look at it at the level of in the project areas specifically, but also to the country level and finally at the project level. And that's really the key here, is to be able to go across these scales to look at local variations all the way through country level and project level variations in key indicators. When users of the dashboard when users interact with the dashboard, they can also explore interactions between indicators. So in other words, what we're trying to do is basically provide the broader overview to users who are interested in that, but also provide much more detail and much more advanced options for users that are interested in that. And for example, for practitioners who are planning interventions on the ground. So that is a very quick tour of what we're working on in terms of assessing and tracking land health in Regreening Africa. Thank you, Mika.
Thank you so much, Tor. And I'm sure questions are still coming in, but there was one quick one before you turn off, which was asking about the photo in your background. Someone was asking if that is an example of Rwanda. So I don't believe it is, but if you want to just let us know what the photo was behind you.
This photo is from Mali.
Thank you. And please put questions or comments into the chat and Q&A so that Tor can also respond. So I think now we've moved from understanding the costs, the benefits from an economic perspective of some of the sustainable land management practices, including agroforestry in different forms. And from Tor, we've now heard about how to not just monitor land degradation, but also to assess land health, and looking at restoration practices and the influence that has on land health, and how we can both monitor that information and make it available. And I just wanted to highlight, as Tor had just shown, that these decision dashboards that are going to be available very soon for Regreening Africa will have that information on the homepage around the economics of land degradation studies, and also some information for each of the countries linked to the key outcomes of the studies, particularly where they overlap with the regreening practices. Now we've come to the end of our presentations, and I recognize that some people may have to start leaving, but it would be great to spend some time now really hearing from everybody about what has come out and what we can do to take this forward, both within Regreening Africa, but also within other programs. So I'm just going to share my screen. And I just wanted to, one moment. I would like us just to have a short discussion. I've seen that most of the questions have been responded to that were in the Q&A and in the chat as we go, and we can continue answering those. But in this interactive discussion, we'd like to have two kind of key parts to it. So first of all, I would like everybody to write in the chat what key policy outcomes, findings, recommendations from what you've heard over the last hour or so really stood out for you. Was there something that you really resonated with that you think is really important? Could you share that in the chat? So I'm just going to give everyone a moment just to reflect and share in the chat any key policy recommendation, study outcome, finding that stood out for you that you think is really important that you'll take forward. So I'm just going to give people a moment to reflect on that. So please, as you write things, just put them into the chat. And I'll just wait for a moment to give people a chance to write anything that stood out for them from any of the countries, something that resonated. I can see some coming in. Around in Rwanda, many people embrace land conservation policies and they're committed to use agroforestry. Fantastic. I can see some responses coming in. FMNR won the Right Livelihood Award and still is so little known and supported by development cooperation. So this might be one of the things that we need to look at when we're talking about the next steps in terms of recommendations. The importance of community participation. The app is free for everyone, and the FMNR study, enthusiasm. There's a lot coming in around FMNR. It's great. Please continue to put your ideas into the chat. It's really wonderful to see what is resonating with people, what messages that came out are really people respond to and want to support. So the second part of this discussion is really on how we can make sure that some of these key recommendations and outcomes are further enhanced through both Regreening Africa and other initiatives. There's many restoration initiatives out there. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I would like to give people an opportunity to either write into the chat what they believe are some of these opportunities to take this forward, but also if people would like to, you're welcome to also raise your hand if you're an attendee and we can allow you to speak. And if you are on the panelist side and something's resonated, you're welcome to also unmute. So it'd be nice to have a discussion on what are our next steps? How do we take this forward? And I think from a Regreening Africa perspective, in addition to sharing this information through the decision dashboards, we're hoping to also have policy dialogues, engagements as we move to the last year of the program next year and starting from September this year, and incorporating these economic arguments within those engagements and in those interactions. So I can see using the economics and benefits as a driver to policy interventions. I can see more coming in on the chat around what people are interested in. I'd like to ask if anyone would like to share their recommendation. Put up your hand if you're on the attendee side, and if you're on the panelist side, please unmute. I wonder if there's anything that's come out from these presentations and discussions that you think we should take forward. So giving a moment. I wonder if there is anyone that would like to speak around what they think is a key next step. If I go to some of the countries, I can see that someone has raised their hand. Paul, I'm just going to allow you to talk. One moment. I just need to find you again. Paul on Google, would you like to share your insight?
Thank you, Bon. Just quickly, very interesting what Regreening Africa is doing. The only observation that from the presentation today, there are quite deliberate targeting of activities in particular zones. And for example, if I take case of Kenya, though this has happened in Somalia to some extent, there is a bit of limitation to high potential areas, and therefore not providing very good indicators which can be applied nationwide. I understand this is a whole Africa initiative, but we also need to look at how do we engage at local country level to initiate activities which will represent and promote deliberate regeneration of the African landscape in a wider kind of dimension, so that because the time frame which the initiative has given itself is also quite short, we need to be a bit more robust in terms of site and ecological area coverage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I think that's a really fantastic example. And I think there's a recommendation for us going forward is to make sure that there's studies that cover both high potential and some what would be considered marginal agricultural areas. I wonder, Thomas, Richard, if you'd like to respond, or if there's anyone else from ELD that would like to respond on that.
Maybe not on that specific question, but from the comments, just like to say that community involvement is an essential part of the planning process that we use to establish the studies. When we created the national teams, they came with their prioritized topics and places. And that was a result of focus group discussions with the communities that they're working in. So that's very key that at the level, the grassroots level, that we involve people on the ground. And at the same time, we're looking at how to scale up these interventions which look economically viable. And that's where we have to bring in the dialogues with the policymakers. A third aspect of this relates to what's going on, particularly now under the UN decade of restoration. There are a lot of people working on tools for measuring land degradation. The ICRAF has one. There's another group called Tools for LDN, and also our own group has been awarded a prize with the GEO land to further develop a context times environment type of tool. What I've suggested to the UNCCD is that there needs to be a coming together of people involved in these tools, because I fear there's going to be a lot of confusion out there about which tool to use, etc. So that's something that's in the pipeline, because the countries have asked for tools and in some cases asked for specific tools. So there's a lot going on in that area that needs to be filtered and I think made a bit more clear, so that countries know which tools they can use based on the capacities they have in their countries, and that's quite important.
Right.
And again, we see the role of the ambassadors in the project as being really important bridges in that sort of dialogue. I'm not sure if I answered that question.
I think that's great, Richard. I mean, I think on the first one, the response is really that the areas that were focused on and the practices was very much about what was considered necessary at the national level. But I also think the point about capturing all types of land uses, and maybe that's the need to continue some of the studies. And now that there's been some capacity building, that could be something that could be considered in some of the countries. And I think the comment on the tools is very welcomed. And I just also wanted to highlight that through the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, there is also a task force looking at monitoring, and they're also looking across the tools to see how these can be matched to different needs. That's also taking place through the UN Food System Summit. We have a solution cluster looking at both monitoring and stakeholder engagement with evidence. And there, I know that the AFI 100 and the Great Green Wall are also having these discussions. So I think there is a lot of efforts now to bring these different tools together, and the UNCCD would be linked quite closely to those. So I just want to give a few more opportunities for people to speak. So I can see Dr. and apologies if I pronounce this incorrectly, Gakuru Wakarenge. Please go ahead.
Yes, my name is, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Good. My name is Dr. Karenge from Nairobi, Kenya. Now, this was, I must say, this was quite an interesting presentation. And I was wondering whether you had an opportunity to see what the cultural aspect of conservation can do to regreening Africa. I'm saying this because as we grew up there wasn't that much degradation of land, but now with this development, as it is nowadays, there is with the urbanization and for instance in Nairobi, a lot of farmland is being turned over into concrete cities, houses, apartments are coming up and all over, and therefore removing the green scenery and the farmland to urbanization. I wonder whether there is anything that can be done to introduce policies that would stop that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karenge. I think that's a very important point around the transfer of agricultural land into urban areas. And I think we can put that down as a point for discussion. I think there's two main areas that are happening. There's a lot of work now on urban regreening or urban forestry to ensure that in our cities we're also having green spaces, that trees are better incorporated. In terms of cultural practices, of course, within Regreening Africa, we're working at the local level. So I'm actually joining you today from Eldoret, and I've been out in Elgeyo Marakwet this morning, hearing from the approaches that people are using, not just in the urban to city, the farmland to city transfer, but also in some areas where population has been increasing due to migration. So I think that this is definitely a conversation that needs to continue, and thank you very much for raising that point. I can see so many fantastic comments coming in through the chat, but I really want to allow this opportunity for people to share their voices. So I can see another hand up is Lakeo Tadese. Would you like to share your comments, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I have enjoyed, the various presentations. Thank you for that. And my point is, by greening Africa is more of on the biological, is more on the biological. That means it's about tree planting or running, planting crops and soil management with this fertility, fertilizer, cover crops, green manuring, blah, blah. But there is a big energy required on how to reduce or correct the natural slope that the land has. Many countries, for example, Rwanda and Ethiopia, they are, even Kenya, they are with, severe steep slopes where cultivation, cropping is practiced. So how can we, correct that, the slope first? For example, the China, the lowest plateau, it is a very mountainous area, and that is first, as a foundation work, change it into bench terraces, So how can we finish? How can we, support farmers on the ground with leveling first as a foundation structure, and then apply the various, greening things, greening measures, biological measures, forestry, agroforestry measures later on. That is one of my point. And the second one is about, it is well developed, this net present value, economic valuation method of the land degradation, which is good. A lot of work has been done, and it is very, very well done. But what about the soil valuation, the lost soil, through valuing the lost soil, through erosion, through sedimentation, overburdening fertile agricultural fields by, debris coming from the mountainous area. And this kind of thinking, this kind of study should also be, assist us, because I am a field person, basically working on natural resource soil conservation, watershed management at the ground level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So there was 2 questions there about leveling areas and also around looking at the loss of soil and the evaluation of that. So I'd like to ask if there's any colleagues from ELD that wanted to have a first go at responding to those questions. Richard, I can see your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yes, many of the studies have estimated the costs of the loss of the soil in terms of replacement costs for the nutrients. So that has been handled in quite a few of the case studies. In terms of capturing that soil that's been washed off the hills, etc. There is a lot of work being done on that. I know that GIZ has a big program in the lowlands of Ethiopia, looking at things like water spread in weirs to capture the flood water. This is a sort of classical ancient technology. That was first done in West Africa. It's now moving into Southern and Eastern Africa quite successfully. So there are technologies, and there is even a network available on that sort of technology.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Richard. And I just wanted to see if there's any other of the panelists that wanted to add anything to the conversation so far, what they've heard or what they've seen in the chat. Okay, Alexandru, please go ahead. This is a representative from the European Commission, please.
Thank you very much, Miki. I didn't want to take much of your time. It's just, I'm very glad actually to see all the enthusiasm and the interest of the participants in the tools that both you, ICRAF, and ELD and GIZ developed. For us, it's the Regreening Africa project is really very important. You've seen also the commitment that were taken for the Great Green Wall recently. So there is really a lot of interest in this type of approach and in regreening the land in order to achieve multiple development objectives. We are very committed to this kind of approaches, but we are of course very much aware that our development finance are quite limited, given all the issues that are out there. So we really appreciate the work that ICRAF and GIZ developed in the framework of this project to develop all the tools and monitoring and frameworks that they developed, because we really believe that it's very much important that all these lessons learned and knowledge actually it's taken up by national policies, programs, but also by the private sector. So we really encourage you to take up the lessons learned that came from this project. I'm sure that you are all aware that most of them are available on the websites as well. So we just to congratulate once again our partners in ICRAF and GIZ. We are very glad to work together on this, and just to reassure as well that the Commission, the European Commission, and representing the European Union is still very much committed on these issues, and we are glad to work together in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alexandru. And we are really grateful not only for the European Union, the European Commission support for the program, but also the support to make sure that what's being learned through this program and the experiences that we're having are really having a positive influence on future investments and policy decisions. So we're also very grateful. And actually, you've led us to a very good point, because we are a little bit over time, but I wanted to let the discussion happen a little bit. But I think we should start moving towards closing. We've shared a lot of links. There's email addresses. I'll put up another email address for Regreening Africa so that you can reach out to us in the future. But Mark, is Nina still online?
I can't see her, I don't know.
So maybe if you don't mind, Mark, if you just want to say any closing remarks from the ELD side, and then I can wrap us up.
I'd love to. I'd love to. Thank you, Mika. Thanks for quickly picking up on what Alex has said before there, it was for us a very good experience, and I'd like to underline that this was not possible without strong support from the stakeholders on the ground, and of course in cooperation with eCraft there. I think that and I said this before, there is a quickly growing interest into sustainable land management measures, approaches, FMNR approaches there. I think that the eCraft colleagues will certainly not be bored in the next 1.5 to 2 years in reaching out to decision makers, and will hopefully be met with a lot of interest for your work. So I would like to thank you all for your interest, would like to thank the colleagues and everybody who's been involved for your support and your motivation. And I'd like to wish you all the best for the next 2 years, or for the rest time of the policy of the project time frame there, for reaching out to decision makers and really make a strong impact there and get beyond that 1 million hectare. Hey, really, all the best, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
You just muted, Mark, unless you're finished.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. And I think just in wrapping up, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us online. It's been really engaging. It's been wonderful to have your comments. We didn't read them all out now, but we will be going through them. I'm just putting this up on the screen so that you can also see where you can reach out if you've got further questions, if something wasn't answered, if you need a contact. And we will, of course, share the presentations and the recording with all of those that registered. But I just wanted to highlight that this collaboration has been a wonderful collaboration with ELD and GIZ, understanding the economics of land degradation and the opportunities, the costs and the benefits of the sustainable land management practices has been a really critical part. And we do hope to bring this forward through Regreening Africa. But this role of restoration is bigger than one program, and we really look for collaboration for others that want to take these messages forward. So please reach out to us. We're looking forward to working with many of you. We thank you for your time. We apologize for running slightly over, and have a good rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you to our panelists. We greatly appreciate your time and your presentations.
Thanks again for the opportunity, and thanks for your patience with us. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Mickey, can I close the room?
You can close the room, Serge. Thank you so much. And
Thank
sorry,
you.
we always run over, huh? But we
No,
really
that's fine.
appreciate you, and I'll see you tomorrow evening. Thank you, Serge.
Good, thank you. Bye-bye.
Miss Finn, I'm so sorry.